This is Leisha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment podcast. And it's actually a very rare thing that when I'm getting to know my guests that I don't previously know offline, I lose track of the time. And before you know it, we've been chatting for about 25 minutes. But you're going to absolutely love my next guest. We're going to talk about some really powerful, impactful, and meaningful things today. And I really hope that you leave this show feeling as warm as I do already getting to know Dan. So this is Dan Cohen. He's the co-founder of Mixxyl and a fellow Sobriety, actually. And I'm really pleased to meet you today, Dan. How are you?
Hi, Alicia. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast. I'm very well, thank you. Very happy the way things are going, but certainly the weather's turned this week, which is the only bit of bad news. I think winter is finally here.
We do live in the UK after all, Dan. I mean, actually, our audience are global. So we have people that are listening right across the globe and will probably not appreciate how quickly things can turn. We go from heat wave to freezing cold dark in the UK, don't we, in a very short period of time. And we are recording this in October 2023. By the time this goes live, it might even be twinkly lights of Christmas. Who knows? Now, for those who are not yet familiar with who you are and what your business does, please give us an introduction as to what you do.
Yeah, thank you. So my name's Dan Cohen. I'm the co-founder of Mixxyl. Mixxyl is a data business that provides demographic and diversity insights to recruitment companies. So we founded this business at the start of the year. Me and my co-founder, a chap called Stuart Morgan, who, just a quick kind of intro on Stuart, who's been in the recruitment tech world for about 20 years.
Wow.
He's worked at companies like Bullhorn, Daxtra. He founded a business called Kylo that kind of worked with Bullhorn, doing a lot of integrations. So he's certainly extremely well qualified to kind of look at demographics and data from a recruitment perspective. Myself and my background, I have been in recruitment since the late 90s, working Christmas holidays and summer holidays with my auntie's business. And in 2005, I started working at a company called Broadbean. We were very small back then, kind of was there for maybe 7-8 years. I was also at Bullhorn for a year where I initially met Stuart. We used to work together as a team. So I was the sales guy looking after the enterprise part, and Stuart was a sales engineer. And then I left Bullhorn and randomly went to the corporate world for about 8-9 years, and spent a lot of time working for a very, very big food tech business in the States and building out diverse teams in London and New York and Philly, Chicago, LA. So I've seen kind of the power of diversity firsthand, and the effect, and the hugely positive effect, I should say, that it has on businesses. So when Stuart and I kind of reconnected back in actually it was November last year, we both had an idea for a business. Mine was more about kind of qualitative feedback from businesses, so people could start to kind of be a bit more truthful at work and kind of start to remove that corporate mask, and create a much kind of happier, safer place for individuals. And then Stuart's idea was Mixxyl, which obviously we thought was a much kind of better idea to start to increase the amount of representation in the workplace. So 10 months later, here we are now.
And by the time this goes out, it'll probably be a year. So congratulations to you. That's phenomenal.
Yes.
And you're based here in the UK?
We are, yes. So I'm based in North London, and Stuart's actually up in Orkney.
Oh, wow. How beautiful. You're about the polar opposite of the UK that you can get for anyone that's got a map out. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that amazing introduction. So in terms of your journey to this point, I love the fact that you've kind of transcended all parts of this industry, which I think gives it really great context and, makes you have a very holistic view. So what's your perception right now of, a lot of our listeners, we get feedback generally from leaders and from recruiters themselves, and certainly from those in the early part of their career. What do you see as the landscape right now for us as the actual recruiters?
Yeah, that's a really broad question.
I know, I realise that.
I think there's a lot of answers to it,
okay.
But I think holistically, I think it's something that like D&I as a whole, I think is being adopted by more and more businesses. There's no doubt, and the larger agencies out there, the larger consultancies, are looking at this, not just obviously because they want to do the right thing and start to kind of increase that representation, but also kind of seeing it as a key business strategy. And from a recruitment perspective, that could be kind of talking about your candidates and your candidate sourcing ideas and the kind of strategies around that to try and get more diverse candidates into the pipeline. It's qualifying out kind of what the client needs and the client demands. As we know, there's some very, very big businesses out there who you probably think or assume were kind of well into their diversity strategy and kind of quite mature on their journey. But when you kind of look under the bonnet, that isn't always the case. And there is a bit of kind of tokenism and lip service. So we quickly identify really that there was kind of no data available for recruiters apart from kind of survey-led data. Which is great, and that's obviously very useful for a lot of businesses, given the right environment that you create to make someone as comfortable as possible to answer the questions within that survey. But we thought, well, there's a lot of information that kind of resides within the CRM, and using our machine learning tools, how we can start to extrapolate some of those candidate demographics to give a kind of pulse check, if you will, or a snapshot of where these recruitment agencies are right now, and enabling them to sort of give a foundation as to how or where to kind of start or begin that journey. So I don't feel like, if I'm being perfectly honest, that there are enough recruitment agencies or recruiters out there that are looking at this as a key business strategy.
I agree.
Which we do find strange when that is what, most businesses over, let's say, 100 people, they understand the need and the will and the drive to kind of build out these diverse workplaces. But I don't think that many recruiters kind of have the tools to even understand how to meet that demand or where to begin on their journey. So hopefully Mixxyl can look after that.
I think so. And interestingly, as you know, I recorded the podcast in one day, and one of the topics we talked about with a previous guest was data. And that as an industry, we have only really in the last few years realised and recognised the value of the data that we have, like you say, on our CRM systems, which we can then extrapolate and use as insights for our clients, but actually for our own advantage as well. Without understanding the data of the people that we're interviewing for ourselves and therefore for our clients, it's impossible to understand where those future diverse talent pools are going to come from. And this is universal. Wherever you're listening to this in the world right now, in whatever sector, you will have a blockage of talent somewhere in the typical or traditional ways that you've gone and found candidates for your clients. So I think it's, whether you are a boutique business, you mentioned before one-man band, which I always find that expression quite ironic when I'm talking to a DEI specialist. One-person band. It's true. Yes. I find that ironic. It applies to everybody. We have the data available. So I think it's, I'm glad I asked you that question. I guess purposefully it was a little bit broad, because I just want to understand what, you've got an objective viewpoint of the industry. And I think the fact is we can do much better than the tokenism that you've described there. But actually, in order for us to, let's think commercially here, in order for us to actually forecast and be able to grow our own businesses, we have to start taking this seriously as the only way we're going to ensure that we're going to have future revenue streams for our clients, surely.
Yeah,
let's be crude about it.
perfect summary. That's spot on. And I think that maybe data as a whole hasn't been looked at enough from our industry. I mean, no. We're a massive huge billions of dollars industry, and we I don't really feel like there's been enough thought or kind of consideration to the amount of data that these businesses hold. And there are companies that have come in like Cube19, which is now Bullhorn Analytics, to kind of really start to kind of farm some of that data and understand, albeit more kind of positioned towards recruiter performance, but it seems that there's still a lot of businesses that are quite kind of transactional when it comes to working with clients, your placement here, your placement there. And that's not, I'm sure it's sustainable for some, but that's not really a kind of strategy that is responsible for growth. What that requires is kind of long-term thinking, strategic partnerships, and kind of moving away from just being a supplier of talent to a partner to those clients. And I think where we've seen that in the last year, and previously in my other life in recruitment, before I left for a while, it's those longer term relationships and strategies that tend to build out a business, and that you can rely on those clients and keep those relationships for a number of years. And if we can arm the recruiter world with a kind of different set of tools to have a different type of conversation around diversity for those clients, then I think people's ears prick up and they're a lot more kind of interested, and they have a conversation as to how you can plug those gaps for them. So it's absolutely, it should be front and center. And I feel quite honored, I guess, that I've spent so much time on that corporate side building those teams. And when I had a team together in London, we had a mix of everyone, right, across every single demographic. And at first was slightly kind of awkward, and some people were hesitant about accepting others. And me and my senior team kind of had to introduce things around socials and ideas and games and stuff that would start to bring people together. And once we had that, and it took probably about a year or so to kind of help everyone understand that the more different we are, the wider perspective, and therefore the broader the thinking. So therefore, the more innovative we're going to be as a group or as a business. And once you explain that to people and they kind of see it through their own eyes, and they see the output of building these teams together, they're kind of sold on this idea. And which is amazing, right? And kudos to everyone kind of at that business, because we had an amazing time. But even today, when we're talking to certain prospects and trying to get in front of people, some of the stuff that we've heard from people that may be kind of 40 upwards, so I'm actually 45 for my sins, I was 45 last month, but some of the response that we've had around the topic of ED&I isn't that positive, right? And
right. Are you suggesting from an older demographic? You mean people that they're more cynical? Why? Because I'm definitely in that group. I'm nearly 50, so why that specific demographic? Are they just cynical about it?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think it kind of comes from lived experience, right? And the way that some of these recruitment firms have kind of grown or scaled over the years. There's always been, certainly when I was there's always kind of like been referral programs, and I've got a friend of a friend, and I've got a mate who can do this.
We hire clones. We hire clones. That's what we do, Dan.
Yeah. So so ultimately you're creating yourself an environment that lacks perspective and lacks diversity. But there's no kind of, I'm not sort of sitting here saying that, oh, you're a bad person for seeing things that way or doing that things, because it's purely a product of the environment, right? It's a product of who we spend our time with, how far kind of we've traveled, where we are geographically. So all we're kind of trying to do is to give people, an element of kind of, I guess, education on this through data, so they can kind of see that position for themselves. And what's really interesting is when we kind of set up, we'll do like a free trial for a company, and they think that they're kind of over here, but once they've got their live data loaded up, actually they're miles away. The reality
is miles away. That's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and it really kind of hits home for a lot of companies, and they're like, oh God, we are miles away from where we thought we were.
Good.
So how are we going to service these clients when we 5% of our candidates are female, or 5% are, from an ethnic minority? Like it's not something that can be, I guess, sort of switched on and off.
No. I
feel like if people want to learn about this, it's on them to do it. You can't necessarily tell someone to educate themselves, or that there needs to be an element of kind of self-improvement or understanding. And even in the last year, I've literally lived this, right? But even in the last year, working with some amazing people out there, like Joe Major and Jenny Child from Balance and Inclusion and Diversity and Recruitment, and learning from them and listening to their stories and kind of what their lived experience has been, and going into recruiters and working and training and coaching, and so it's a never-ending scale of learning. I don't think that anyone's ever going to kind of put a stamp on and say, well, that's it, I know everything.
We're never going to get there fully, are we? It's ever
we'll never get there, but it's as long as we're starting to kind of get onto that journey.
I definitely think as an industry we're on the journey, and I think at the moment, if I'm going to use a really terrible analogy of a train, you've got three carriages. One is the front carriage is those companies that are using the data, are absolutely leading the way, can say that they are embracing and living the diversity, flag that they've got fantastic stats, whatever it might be. You've then got the middle carriage of those that have the intention but have possibly just done the tick box exercise and do just enough. And then you've got those who really couldn't give a shit, who just think, I don't care, this is how it's always worked, we're doing really well, we've just been to Ibiza, whatever it might be. Now, the way I see it is that train at some point is going to change direction because things happen. COVID happened, there might be, who knows what legislation's ahead, but I think that data within our industry has never been more important. And I think, we could encapsulate that with, the data that we use on things like, commission schemes, remuneration schemes, keeping people feeling rewarded. It plays into the whole HR strategy. This isn't just sat on its own. EDI doesn't just sit in a corner on its own. It's everything. Retaining the best talent, hiring the best talent. And, to use the word crude again, recruitment leaders sat in that last carriage. You are never going to hire and retain the best talent if you ain't doing these elements in the future. It's going to be, this isn't just a tick button, I can't think of the right expression, what I'm trying to say, a tick box exercise. You're not just doing it for a marketing, you used the word before, it's not just a marketing exercise. This is actually something where if you're not actually hiring in the diverse talent, you're creating an echo chamber of clones, and actually you're only as good as the people that you're hiring in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I like your train analogy.
Thank you.
I've heard a few of those. There's buses and there's bus stops and on the journey, all these kind of things, right? But I think one of the key things that people tend to kind of maybe don't realize, and I was having a really interesting conversation the other day with quite a senior kind of TA leader at a very big firm, and she was saying that there's one thing kind of looking at from a recruitment, because she was an ex-recruiter, like there's one thing kind of looking at what your client dynamics are and how your clients are changing the way that they bring on people, how they onboard them, the inclusivity and belonging strategies around it, which are equally as important as the recruitment process. But we also kind of pointed out the changing demographics of the younger generations that are coming through. And this lady actually knew years back, she was a recruiter as well back in the day. And she said something to me that was really interesting, which was like, when we were sort of 20, 1,000 years ago, there were key things that we asked for in a recruitment role or a sales job, whatever. And it was kind of broken down into, it sounds basic, right? But it's your basic salary, your compensation on your commission, if you had a car, and you had a phone. Yeah. And that's all what we those are the sort of four things that would sort of have a job or not, and everything's fine. Today, I've got a lot of kind of cousins that are aged from maybe 15 to sort of 22. Those aren't the things they're looking for. They're looking for inclusivity. They're looking for cultural fit. They're looking for belonging. They're looking for work flexibility. So if you're not able to kind of provide them these environments to do their work, they're just going to sort of go somewhere else, or they'll use another recruiter, or they'll look to apply for jobs directly. So, this is not just about doing the right thing. It's keeping up with the changing times, which are changing really, really quickly. And people want different things from work. And, we touched on it earlier, kind of about the work from home argument and the flexibility piece and stuff. And, each to their own on that. There's definitely not one size fits all, and everyone needs to kind of do what's best for them, what's best for their workforce. But what does that workforce look like? What are the demographics through it? And if you don't know that, certainly for some of those larger kind of corporate businesses out there with whatever 50, 100,000 people, you're never going to kind of put the right ideas in place, or the right strategies to, ensure you get that inclusive
it's true.
Kind of ideas, to sort of attain that longevity of the people that are working for you. So times are changing, and people need to react.
I'm chuckling because you're up to it. I mean, I'm definitely of the same era as you. I think it was, like you say, you didn't even ask about holidays because everybody's got 20 days. That was it. But nowadays, and I am the parent. I am the parent of, I've got 2 teenagers, and I know a lot of their friends, very diverse. And it is that sense of belonging, but equally, because of the world that they've grown up in, a lot of them have, portfolio careers. They might do some DJing, they might do some piercing, they might do hairdressing, they might do Botox at the weekend, lashes at the weekend. And I'm not joking here. They will have other careers and other income streams, which is why they need the flexibility. Have you thought about that as an employer, that's actually something that they're not going to leave that behind? That's not a contradiction, or it's not moonlighting or anything like that. We can talk about neurodiversity, people with limiting, ability to actually get into the office. You're missing out on the global community. And I think there's so much going on. There's so many moving parts at the moment that companies that are not having this as a meaningful conversation, speaking to experts like yourself. One of our proud partners of the podcast is Inclusion Crown. They're an educator. They actually work with businesses on the actual, so you're doing the data, they're actually educating. Bit like, it's what Joe Major does. That this is so important now for, ensuring that your business is still around and has actual employees in 5 years' time. And it is literally as simple as that, because those people will go, I don't feel like I belong. I look around and go, no one else here has piercings or tattoos. No one else here has small children. No one else here, has to sit in the, have headphones on because there's too much going on in terms of stimulation because I've got ADHD, whatever it might be. And these are all things that we're encouraging to lose the stigma around, and yet we're not then making safe workplaces for them because we're not understanding. Yeah. We're not understanding. Speaking of belonging, one of the key things you and I talked about off camera was the fact that, and we talked about it on our chat as well, was that we're both soberites. We're both following sober lifestyles. So for you, talk to me about your journey to sobriety, if you want to.
Yeah, of course. I'm more than happy to share it. Look, I think my grandparents were Irish. I had my first sip of Guinness when I was about 6 years old at the pub with my granddad.
Nice.
As everyone does, I think growing up it's certainly in the UK, there's a huge drinking culture, right? Most weekends, even at a kind of relatively young age.
Yeah.
And I never kind of would ever consider myself as addicted to alcohol at all, but was out, 2 or 3 times a week, maybe on the weekends. I'm quite a tall chap. I'd have to sort of drink a lot to feel drunk and a bit of a heavyweight, I guess. But so that was kind of my life for a long time. And that was, here in the States, across Europe. I'm a massive Tottenham fan for my sins, lots of away days, these kind of things. And don't switch off the podcast just yet. But so it was, it was part of my life, I guess. It was part of my social scene. And anyway, a long story short, I was out on New Year's Eve in 2019, and I guess kind of overdid it and got home the next day, literally like in the afternoon. I don't know even what happened. Kind of looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, wow, you look green. And in the months leading up to that, I guess I was drinking quite a lot. And I was lacking that kind of euphoric feeling. When you were having a drink, I felt like I was feeling a bit down, and it was kind of taking me the other way. And I didn't really, everyone was having fun and laughing and joking. I was kind of slumped in the corner and just not really feeling it anymore. I think it finally maybe caught up with me after 25 years of it, maybe. Or 30 years of it, whatever. Yeah. So anyway, I decided to just do dry January, just to kind of, with the toxins, healthy lifestyle, and did that for the month. And I was like, you know what, I feel good. I'm going to do February as well, and March. And I just carried on. So there was nothing kind of sinister about my kind of wanting to stop drinking. It just felt like the right thing to do. And I've not had a drop. I feel better. I feel like my skin's better. I've lost a bit of weight. Like, I just feel better about myself, really. Not to say there aren't occasions where I miss it, the weddings and the stag parties and stuff, of course. But that's more to kind of make me feel more comfortable in that environment, right? Because everyone's had a few.
The peer pressure.
You're kind of stone cold. So you get a little bit of peer pressure. There's always kind of people bringing shots to the bar, like, you sure you don't want a shot of Jaeger or tequila or something? And I think that's an element of that as well, to kind of hide some of their own guilt as well. Certainly some of my friends who drink more than anyone I've ever met. But yeah, so look, it's been great for me, and I'm in a good place with it now.
Good. And thank you for sharing that with us, because I realised that was very personal. And I echo a lot of what you said as to my, I didn't class myself as an alcoholic, and I've talked about mine many times before. And if anyone wants to discuss anything offline with me, I'm not an alcohol counsellor, but I'm always happy to talk about my own sober journey, because for me, it's, the populace in this country, particularly in the UK, it's a binge drinking culture, and it still is a binge drinking culture. And I'm almost, I guess, 30 years, well, no, more than that, 30 odd years, because I started drinking probably around 14, 15, like you do. But I think the reason I wanted to bring it up with you specifically is because we're talking this in context of, people feeling like they belong in a culture. And I think there's definitely, I feel that there's now this acceptance to talk about it openly and to not feel ostracized in a workplace environment, and that people should feel safe to be able to talk about that. So, you've got such an, like I said before, this kind of eclectic viewpoint because of where you've worked and the role that you do now. What would you advise employers listening and leaders listening, of which there are many, thank you for joining us, what would your advice be to those who look around the room and think, we need to be more supportive to people going on this sober journey?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question. I think, and again, through lived experience and having a really diverse team, quite a lot of whom weren't drinkers for various different reasons. So it was kind of like just really trying to kind of keep open lines of communication when it comes to any form of social kind of activity. And I'll be honest, for years it was always, let's just get down the pub or the bar, have a few drinks, grab a kebab in the evening, like whatever. And I feel like it's not overly complex, right? You just need to ask your team, ask your department, ask whatever, what it is that they kind of want when it comes to looking at the more kind of social aspects of work and what that looks like. And there are so many different other activities that you can do apart from drinking now that, whether that's mini golf or axe throwing or go-karting or whatever it might be. And even, those places that you kind of find in town that may well have a sort of bar attached. So hopefully you're creating something that's good for both sides.
Everybody.
But yeah, exactly. But it's difficult. And I was actually talking to a friend of mine, actually works in the recruitment world a couple of weeks, in the insurance world a couple of weeks back. And there's a challenge sometimes with kind of some of his team members who aren't drinkers, and the culture around that industry still is really kind of alcohol driven. It's about entertaining clients and going out for dinners and meeting up with them and having drinks and this kind of stuff. And it shouldn't be a prerequisite of any job that is part of the job description. Still, obviously, go out with clients and do your best as such. But there is a bond that is formed, unfortunately, between if you are with a client and you're not drinking, or you are with a client and you are drinking. And not saying that's a negative thing, because you can get a lot of positive kind of feedback from that. People have had a few drinks, they feel more relaxed, they open up, they're more honest, you communicate better, or you maybe try and communicate better, depending on how drunk you are, slurring your words or not. But so it absolutely goes on in a lot of the key industries, insurance, banking, now even recruitment and the like, probably for these larger companies that you're trying to kind of impress or work with. So I feel like it is something that's quite prominent still. It shouldn't be, and there shouldn't be any kind of link towards having a beer or a glass of wine or anything else and how well you can do your job. Those things should be absolutely separate. They do cross over. It's difficult. It's difficult to split them. But I do feel like there's a ton of new activities and things that people can do. Appreciate that there's maybe some hurdles in the way that people are working from home and they've kind of sort of come into town, but there's still kind of online things that you can do, and there are companies out there that create kind of online games experiences. They do,
and events and everything.
Yeah. Definitely. So but look, it's a challenge, I think, and I'm definitely not in a position to kind of say what the answers are, because I think every company is different, but you have to do what's right across every single member of your team and involve everyone in XYZ activities.
And be consistent with how you treat people, whether they pick up a glass of wine or not. That's my advice. And the fact is, there are so many choices around alcohol-free drinks now anyway. So, and that wasn't the case 6-7 years ago when I gave it up. So I think that you've given a very pragmatic answer there, actually, because you've kind of highlighted that it is a challenge, and it is a challenge. It's not an easy journey to go on. We do get a lot of listeners who do follow my sober journey. So I know that if you're on your sobriety journey yourself, whether you're moderating or whether you're trying to live an alcohol-free life, it's really important to understand that we recognize it is a challenge, but it's worth it. And of all the people that I've ever spoken to who are on the other side and have chosen a sober life, no one's ever regretted it. It's simple as that. It's been the best decision they've made. It's not about giving up the alcohol. It's about choosing a different way of life. And it's one that if it suits you, you'll never regret it.
Couldn't agree more with that. I think that's really well constructed. It's not just drinking, it's the day or 2 days afterwards with a terrible hangover and not being able to do things or see friends or family, this sort of stuff. So it does affect people, and it affects people in different ways as well. I know people that can go out till 4 a.m. and be at their desk at an early 8 a.m.
That was me until probably my late 20s, early, till I had my kids basically. And then anyone with children will tell you there's no way, it's impossible. No, listen, that's been I really love it. And, the narrative out there is that, companies like yourself, you are, certainly, I don't want to use the word disruptive, but you are disrupting what we're doing as in an industry to say we have to recognise that we can't just sit on the laurels that we've had for the last 60 odd years as an industry or however long. We need to move forward. We should be innovative with it. And you know what? Anyone listening, we are the educators ourselves. We educate the end user clients. So people can connect to you on LinkedIn, I presume, Dan, if people start wanting to know more about Mixxyl, if they want to get involved.
Great. Yeah, please do. All our details are on their email and the like and everything. So please get in touch, and we can set you up on a free trial, upload your data, and just have a review. No obligation. Everything's complimentary, and take it from there. But
that's fantastic.
It's always interesting. Throws up a lot of surprises.
I bet it does. And if anybody does want to do that sounds amazing that there's a complimentary trial of it. Make sure you mention the Recruiters Recruitment podcast, because then Dan will be able to monitor using data where you've come from. So thank you for joining us. You've been a superb guest, and it's been really lovely to get to know you. And we forgive the fact that you're a Spurs fan, because you've not had an easy couple of seasons, have you? Really, let's face it.
Well, it's been a tough 30 years, to be honest with you, but we roll with the punches. But
listen,
thank you for having me. It's been
a pleasure.
Really good.
Thank you so much.